David Stevens thought he could trust his childhood friend, Bruce McWilliams. But when Bruce sold David's land without permission and disappeared, everything changed. Bruce's wife, Consuela, suspects her husband is hiding more than just financial secrets. Could he be involved with another woman from Central America? As David uncovers Bruce's shady deals, he discovers Bruce's shocking proposition: swapping wives. Consuela, feeling used and betrayed, reveals disturbing details about Bruce's manipulative behavior. With tension rising, David confronts the dark truth about his friend. Will he uncover Bruce's full betrayal before it's too late? In this tangled web of deception, loyalty is tested and trust is shattered. I checked the caller ID before picking up the phone. It was strange to get a call on a Sunday afternoon, a time my wife Claire and I had set aside for family. But what was even stranger was that it was my lawyer calling from Vero Beach, Florida. "Hi, Pete. What's going on?" I said. "Hi, Dave. I'm sorry to bother you on a Sunday, but I heard something. I wanted to check with you. I was playing golf this morning with my usual friends, including George. You remember George, right?" "Of course. Nice guy." "Not great at golf," I replied. "Exactly. He now works in real estate, focusing on farms. He mentioned that your garden was sold to a developer. I thought it was odd because I hadn't heard anything about it from you. I figured you'd tell me before making such a big decision." I listened to Pete, feeling stunned by his words. It took a moment for me to gather my thoughts. "No, we definitely didn't sell the garden. We've been thinking about developing it ourselves someday." Pete said, "Maybe George was mistaken. I can look into it tomorrow when everyone is back at work." "Thanks, Pete, but I think I should fly there myself. It's been 3 months since I visited, which is longer than I usually wait. I feel like I need to check on things." I didn't understand why I felt uneasy. We ended the call, and I reached out to Claire. "Hey, do you want to come with me to Vero? Pete heard a rumor I need to check out." We had sent the kids to their grandparents' house for a while. They enjoyed spending time at the ranch where their grandparents spoiled them. 2 hours later, we had tickets to Orlando and were getting our bags ready. The next morning, we flew into Orlando, and I rented a car to drive to Vero. I tried calling our grounds manager, Bruce McWilliams, to ask him to pick us up, but he wasn't answering his phone. This was not unusual. He loved fishing and might have gone somewhere without a signal for a couple of days. Maybe he just forgot to charge his phone before he left last night. I went online to check my bank accounts. The smaller account, which Bruce could access, was almost empty, showing only $150. The minimum needed to keep it open without fees. We usually kept $125,000 in that account for day-to-day expenses unless we had a specific need. Our larger account, which usually had around $100,000, was under my control. I had blocked all withdrawals from it just in case something was wrong. I could unlock it later without anyone knowing. As I drove along I-95, passing Cape Canaveral and heading toward Vero, memories of my childhood on the east coast of Florida came flooding back. My grandfather bought a piece of land in the 1940s. It was affordable back then, so he purchased a square mile, about 5 miles from the Indian River Lagoon. He built a big concrete block house and planted a garden. By the time I was born, my grandparents had moved to a retirement community, and my family moved into the house on the property. The garden had a lot of grapefruit and different kinds of oranges. We grew white, pink, and red seedless grapefruit, along with Hamlin Temple pineapple oranges, and the usual red navel and Valencia oranges. There were also rows of tangerines and various types of Duncan grapefruit, but those were mostly for our own use from September to June. Growing up, I didn't pay much attention to the details like most kids. I didn't learn much about growing citrus fruit from my family. I think I picked up a lot just by being around them. Despite that, Vero was a wonderful place to grow up. The sandy beaches and sunny skies were always inviting, with lots of tourists and plenty of fun to be had. Most of my friends were into surfing. It sounded exciting, but it wasn't my favorite activity. I loved going out fishing on boats from the Sebastian Inlet, heading 10 or 20 miles out into the ocean. I hung out with local kids who were similar to me, all from families who owned citrus groves. We learned to drive tractors and help our parents during harvest time. While we didn't pick the fruit ourselves, we lifted heavy boxes and loaded them onto trailers to take to the processing plants. There, the fruit would be cleaned, packed and shipped as fresh produce. I was especially close to my friend Bruce McWilliams. His dad didn't own a garden but managed several for other people. Bruce planned to attend the University of Florida in Gainesville to study agriculture. It may sound funny, but agriculture is more than just farming. It involves business, chemistry, biology, marketing, and studying soil and animal care. Along with regular classes, a degree in agriculture covers a lot of ground. Modern farming is tough work, but it can be very satisfying. Sadly, Bruce's family moved away when we were in 6th grade. Even after that, we remained best friends until we graduated high school. We spent time at the beach and learned about the ups and downs of drinking too much. We attended dances together and experienced many significant moments in our lives. Bruce was always taller than me, but I caught up with him in our second to last year. He grew to his full height while we were freshmen, but in our second to last year, I finally caught up with him, and we began to look into each other's eyes. In those early years, he was not only taller but also bigger. I was slim and lean, while Bruce was strong and sturdy. I ran cross-country and track, while Bruce played center on the football team and catcher on the baseball team. Bruce's activities made him one of the popular kids at school. My activities? Not quite so much. Even with our differences, we stayed close. Our group also included Pete Andrews, who joined us in 8th grade. Pete, who is now my lawyer, was the quiet one among us. He worked a bit harder than Bruce or me. Pete lived about half a mile away with his parents, close to the beach. He was an only child and always wanted to be like his dad, who was a lawyer. Pete was part of the chess club, which some called geeky. But we met in the orchestra, where he played the trumpet, and I played the clarinet and saxophone. Soon he was joining Bruce and me and having fun and getting into minor mischief. It might have gotten us in trouble today, but back then, it was just typical teenage behavior. The police would take us home so our parents could talk to us, but they didn't arrest us. We didn't do anything really bad, though. We once caught a small alligator and put it in the pool in front of City Hall. Yes, that was us. My time in Vero came to an end, but by the time we finished school, the garden was thriving, and Bruce's dad was hired to take care of it. Part of his pay was that the McWilliams family got to live rent-free in a house on the property. He also managed other gardens and built a small but successful business. My parents still visited town about 6 to 8 times a year, staying for a week or more to check on things and enjoy their friends. Actually, they bought a house near the beach because they liked to stay so often. I later used this beach house when I came back to the city. My wife and I moved in after our wedding, treating it as a second home. Claire loved the place and made her own friends in town. They played tennis and socialized at the country club whenever we were nearby. After high school, we asked Bruce's dad to manage the garden, and my dad bought 2 more pieces of land, this time in central Tennessee. His real passion was raising certified black and red Angus cattle for beef. He and my mom moved to Maury County, south of the Columbia County seat, and started their ranch. To be honest, Bruce, Pete, and I would have gone our separate ways anyway. Bruce went to the University of Florida in Gainesville, Pete went to Duke University in North Carolina, and I attended Vanderbilt University in Nashville. Bruce, of course, studied agronomy. Pete studied political science before going to law school at Wake Forest. I earned a degree in economics and then got my MBA. Vanderbilt doesn't have an undergraduate business program, but their business school is highly respected. We all stayed in touch over the years. It was easy to connect with Bruce because his dad managed our garden. Whenever we visited for work, which was often, I would usually end up seeing Bruce. When his father retired, Bruce took over the garden. He was a well-respected manager in a business full of shady characters in the Florida citrus world. Pete and I didn't meet often, but we spoke regularly and would get together after school ended. After finishing law school, Pete returned to Vero and became our lawyer. We mainly saw each other at social events, and he promised he wouldn't charge us. When we got to Vero, I dropped off our luggage and started setting up meetings with local friends. I then went to a local restaurant where I met Pete. He was already sitting there when I arrived. He waved as I walked in, and I joined him at the table. I didn't talk to George this morning, but there's some talk in the real estate world that one of the development companies has bought your garden, I said. That's not good. We'll stop that today. The seller probably hasn't sent in the papers yet. By the way, Pete, the garden's account was almost empty last Friday. I blocked all the other accounts when I checked online, I added. Good call. I would have suggested that myself if you hadn't already done it. But we should go to the bank and real estate agency just to be sure, Pete replied thoughtfully. At that moment, things got worse when Big Bob Smith walked in. He spotted us and walked over with purpose. Hey, boss, what's going on? I knew I wouldn't like his news. Baba, as he was known, grew up near Vero. He was a tall, thin man who had managed our garden operations for 20 years. People called him Baba because his face reminded them of a former football player named Bubba Smith. I think his real name was Dwayne, but once the name Bubba was out, it stuck. I stood up, shook Baba's hand, and then we both sat down. I waved to the waitress for another cup of coffee, which arrived quickly. So, Baba, what's going on? I asked. First off, Bruce told me you were thinking about selling the garden, but he said not to tell anyone since nothing's set yet. More importantly, he sold 3 tractors and left us with only the old Deutz, Baba explained. And on top of that, no paychecks were given out last Friday. Damn, I said, feeling the weight of the situation. Pete agreed without hesitation. Bubba just nodded. I needed a moment to think about everything. All right, Bubba. I'll head to the bank and get the paychecks for you and the crew. I still need to go anyway. Bruce is not telling the truth. If he said he was selling the garden supplies, that's not right. You know, we sold the tractors too. I think I understand. It looked like some of his friends were involved. There was also another guy who wanted a 3rd tractor. He responded. Okay, then why don't you call the Sheriff's Department's Agricultural Theft Unit and report it? Tell them Bruce was selling equipment and you got suspicious. You checked with me and found out he was taking garden equipment without permission. Tell them they can call me to confirm, and I'll gladly help. Happy to assist you, boss. That John Deere was nearly new, with only about 20 hours of work on it. He quickly finished his coffee and got up to start working. Now I had another challenge, getting paychecks for the crew. I needed to reach our payment service and send them money so they could make the checks with the right withholdings and taxes. I could handle that later in the day. First, I needed to go to the bank. When Pete and I got to the bank, I asked for the manager. Henry Wright was another local guy, younger than us by several years. But we all knew him. Henry hurried out of his office to us. Hey, Pete. Hey, Dave. I'm really glad to see you, Dave. I've tried to call you all morning. Let me guess. Are you worried about blocking some accounts? Yes, I am, but let's go to my office to chat. There's no need for everyone to hear our talk. Agreeing, Pete and I followed Henry into his office, where he closed the door. His office had glass windows overlooking the parking lot on one side and the bank on the other. The wall behind him was solid, so no one could sneak up on Henry. He offered us something to drink, water, coffee, or soda. We told him that we had just eaten and didn't need anything at the moment. Is it all right to discuss your accounts in front of Pete? Henry asked. Of course, I replied. He is our lawyer here in town and is helping me understand what's going on. Henry continued. Bruce came in last Friday and took out almost all of the money, leaving just the minimum needed for your account. He's allowed to sign on this account and can do that. I asked the cashier after Bruce made the withdrawal if he mentioned what he would use the money for. Just curious, not worried. She said he didn't say anything but was friendly, although he seemed to be in a hurry. This morning, a man came in with a power of attorney that you signed. He wanted to take out a large amount of money from your main account, which he is not allowed to access. The same cashier who saw him on Friday told him she could not help with his request and asked me to check into it. When I looked at the account, I saw that you had blocked it the night before, but I didn't tell Bruce that. Instead, I asked him to show me the power of attorney document. He didn't seem surprised. He handed me a notarized copy of the document, saying it allowed him to access your account. He explained that when you were planning to develop your garden to sell to a construction company, you needed outside experts to check things like water and electrical lines. His explanation made sense, but I knew you wanted to keep the accounts safe. I told him I needed to make copies of the power of attorney. He looked a bit unsure, but agreed. I explained that I couldn't move forward with the request until I had a copy and promised to return the original. He gave it to me, and then I asked June to make a couple of copies. After she finished, I returned the original to him. I think he thought that would be the end of it, and that he could easily get what he wanted. I told him, like the cashier, that I wasn't sure how to process the power of attorney and needed to call the main office for help. I said he could come back in the afternoon to finish the process. By then, I was starting to feel suspicious. After he left, I took out the signature cards that I had seen you sign before. When I compared your signature on the card with the one on the power of attorney, I noticed two things. The signature on the document looked like someone had copied it from another paper. We had some training on spotting fake signatures, and this one raised some flags. The writing was not smooth, and there were parts where the letters didn't match up right, like someone was copying them one by one. The biggest clue was that your signature usually includes your middle name, but this document only had your first and last name. You're right, Henry. I always use my middle name on official papers. Right, Pete? My middle name is Wellborn from my mother's side of the family. I have only used it for legal documents, so not many people know about it except Pete and my family. In that moment, I looked out the window to the left and saw what I thought was Bruce's truck. His truck was a 2-year-old Chevy 2500 X4, painted a shiny silver that made it easy to spot. He seemed to slow down in the parking lot until he was behind Pete's car. When he saw Pete's license plate, which said Law Pit Bull, he suddenly sped away. I quickly stood up. Was that really Bruce in the parking lot? I rushed out of Henry's office, through the main doors and into the parking lot, with Pete and Henry following close behind. But all we could see was Bruce's truck driving off fast. I turned to Henry and said, "The good news is I don't think he's coming back soon." Pete nodded and added, "Yeah, he probably realized that his plan with the bank didn't work." Pete looked at me, curious. "What would you do if you caught him?" he asked. I thought for a moment and replied, "I'd keep him here until you call the police." But Pete reminded me, "Right now, we don't have a reason to arrest him. He could take money from the account, but the other things we think he's done are just rumors. Plus, he has 50 pounds on you and a local reputation as a bully. You might get hurt trying to hold him back." I smiled at Pete, knowing he was probably right. Just then, Pete's phone rang with the sound of the Perry Mason theme. He turned to Henry and me, asking if he could step away while he took the call. I said goodbye to Henry and waited for Pete to finish. After he hung up, he turned to me and said, "It was George. He wants to know which real estate agency sold your garden and who bought it." I replied, "It was Andy Lopez and Associates. Andy's daughter Stella was the agent." "Who's the buyer?" Pete answered, "Indian River Land Developers. Jake Stern, right? He's tried to talk to us 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years. I nodded and asked, "So, what's the plan now?" Pete said, "I should go back to my office and start writing letters. First, I'll write a letter to Bruce, saying he's no longer in charge of the garden. Then I'll write to Andy Lopez to tell him the sale was wrong and to demand that everything goes back to how it was. Finally, I'll write to all the people who dealt with Bruce and let them know they will be paid, and if they're customers, they still need to send their checks to our garden. You should go home and make sure all the credit cards are canceled, although he's probably already used them all," I added. "And don't forget to sort out the paychecks for the employees." "Okay, Pete. Call me later if you hear anything new." "Sounds good. Paying the garden workers shouldn't be too hard," he replied. We only had 5 full-time workers, Baba. There were 2 men who took care of the gardens and 2 women who managed our money. They counted the boxes of fruit we sold, kept track of who bought them, and handled payments for the temporary workers in the gardens. I called the payroll service and moved the needed money from our freelance account. They took care of everything else. I knew it was important to do this quickly since most workers relied on their paychecks. Our team was better off than many, but they still needed steady money. I made sure they were taken care of, and they showed great loyalty to us in return. I opened my laptop and saw that Pete had sent me some letters to review. I approved them, and Pete sent them out, ending our relationship with Bruce McWilliams' management firm and telling the realtors to stop the false sale. We would also send a letter to all the people who had dealt with Bruce, letting them know they would still be paid and that any payments from customers would go to our garden address. We only had 1 garden credit card, and as Pete expected, it was maxed out. I stopped any more withdrawals, but it was a little too late for that. Thankfully, the car had a low credit limit and a daily cash withdrawal cap. Maybe I can give something back. I took care of the urgent tasks. Clear sent me a message that she was having dinner with friends from her club, so I was on my own. Since I had some time, I poured myself a drink, using a large ice cube in a glass. I went to the liquor cabinet to pour a shot of Scapa, a single malt Scotch whiskey from Orkney, the Northern Islands of Scotland. It was so smooth that its flavor burst in my mouth, making me feel alive. It always helped me think better. Sitting in my reclining chair, I leaned back and remembered how Bruce and I grew up together. We did a lot together as kids. Once, we caught a 4-foot alligator and put it in the reflecting pool in front of City Hall. Another time, we mixed some soap into dye and poured it into the fountain at a fancy hotel on the Barrier Island. After that, both places installed security cameras, and our fun with the fountain ended. Sometimes, we would sneak into the garden and start one of the tractors, moving it around a little. We never damaged anything because that would have been wrong, so we made our own rules. It was with Bruce that I first tried alcohol, smoked a cigarette, and learned about the effects of drinking. I picked up some important lessons from those early experiences. After I got sick and threw up everything in my stomach, my dad woke me up the next day and made me work in the garden all day long. I decided to cut back on drinking after that. To be honest, not everything we did as kids was bad. Both Bruce and I were in Cub Scouts, went fishing in the ocean with our dads when they rented a boat with a captain, and we both got good grades in school. I usually did better in my studies than Bruce, but I never aimed to be the top student. We also had activities outside of school. Bruce played football and other sports, while I played in the school orchestra and ran track and cross country. Overall, I never thought our lives would lead us to trouble with the law, but experiences like the garden sale made me think more deeply about what we were doing. As we grew up, Bruce and I took more risks that sometimes crossed the line into trouble. I have to admit that even though Bruce came up with some wild ideas, I was eager to join him. He was bigger than me and a bit older. I knew he took more chances when I wasn't there. He always seemed to get away with it. He was my best friend, and I think I always wanted him to think well of me. When our other friend Pete joined us, he was probably smarter than I was because he often didn't go along with Bruce's crazier ideas. He told us he wanted to be a lawyer one day and that having a criminal record would make it hard to get into a good law school. We understood where he was coming from and didn't blame him. We still invited him on our adventures, as we called them. Sometimes Pete would join us and sometimes he wouldn't. I respected his long-term goals even if Bruce teased him, calling him weak for avoiding our craziness. When we were teens, there were times Bruce and I would sneak out to the harbor and take boats that belonged to people we didn't know. I never knew if Bruce had any friends at the marina, but he always found a way to get the keys to open the gates that were meant to keep people away from the boats. He knew when the owners weren't around and didn't notice their boats were gone for the day. We always returned the boats clean and filled the fuel tanks back to what they were when we took them. If someone found their boat with less fuel than they left it with, it might have made them suspicious. Bruce would make sure to fill the tank back up to match the level we found it at. Looking back, I should have realized that Bruce was thinking a lot about how to hide what was really wrong. It might not have seemed like a big deal, but it was still a crime. I also began to worry that sometimes Bruce had things that were stolen from the boats in the harbor. One day, while we were on Bruce's dad's boat, Bruce suddenly had some binoculars I'd never seen before. These were obviously fancy marine binoculars. They weren't brand new, but they looked great. Bruce always had a story ready. He said one of the garden owners took him out on his boat. When Bruce praised the binoculars, the owner just gave them to him. I don't know what to think about that. Sometimes strange things happen, but that story sounded a bit odd. When you hear horses, you generally don't think of zebras. Once I saw Bruce sell a gun I had never seen before to a known troublemaker from Fort Pierce. When I asked him about it, he said he was just a smart guy helping someone sell a pistol. He also knew that the man from Fort Pierce wanted to buy one, so he was just making a little money from the difference. At this point, he was over 21, so he could legally trade in Florida. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Bruce might take something if he thought he could get away with it. Being friends with Bruce came with some perks. As the best player on our football team, he was popular with many girls. One afternoon after a game against the Port St. Lucie team where Bruce scored 3 times, including the winning touchdown, he asked if I wanted to hang out. I think he suspected I was still a bit shy and wanted to introduce me to some fun experiences. I said yes, of course. Who wouldn't want to join in? He asked me to bring some drinks, tequila if I remember right, and meet at one of the local parks. I grabbed a bottle from my parents' stash, and Bruce brought along 2 girls. I knew Bruce was into Latinas, so I wasn't surprised when he showed up with Connie Lopez and another girl named Eva, whose last name I can't recall. Both were Hispanic. Connie's family had come from Cuba, and Eva's family was from Mexico. Her dad worked on a farm, and her mom worked in a factory. Connie was pretty well known in town because she was a cheerleader at Vero Beach High. I wasn't sure where Iva went to school. She might have attended a different school or maybe wasn't in school anymore. I wasn't particularly curious about it. Bruce often joked that Latinas were the best. He had a strange idea about them. We found a bench in the park, away from everyone else, and started making tequila shots. We squeezed some lime and dipped them in salt. It wasn't fancy tequila, just what my parents used for margaritas or mixed drinks. After we finished most of the bottle, we went to a small hotel that wasn't directly on the beach, and I paid for a room. Looking back on it, I realized I had been the one buying drinks and getting a room quite a bit. It seemed like Bruce was using me for money even back then. As soon as we entered the room, Bruce turned on the radio to a salsa station. The girls started to dance, and it was pretty fun to watch. Bruce asked Connie to look after me and show me how to dance, while he spent time with Eva. After we all showered and got ready to leave, Connie held on to me until Bruce and Eva went out. Then she told me something important. "Dave, please call me next week so we can get together again. But listen closely. Don't fall in love with me. Many men think they love the first girl they spend a night with. But that isn't love. It's just attraction. You'll meet many women, Dave. You're smart, good-looking, and have money. And I want to help you enjoy your time. Just remember, we are not in love. I don't love you, and we have limited time together. I enjoy going out and meeting different guys, so keep that in mind and don't feel sad when it ends. I like you a lot. You're a good guy, better than Bruce. Don't be upset when we finish things. Just find someone new and enjoy being young and free." She was right, of course. We dated for a few weekends, about 6 weeks in total. Then she said she had taught me all she could. "You know, Dave, I think a lot of you. If I weren't so focused on other things, I might want to marry you. You treat me nicely and take me on real dates, not like the other guys I usually go out with. I'd be happy just being close, but remember, I did warn you. Our time together has a limit. It won't be hard for you to find other girls who are interested in you. I told my friends at school about you. Believe me, many of them would like to meet you. Don't be surprised if some come up to you." She laughed a bit as she said this. Then she added, "Now let me tell you something you might not want to hear. Bruce isn't really your friend. He might have been in the past, but Bruce tends to use people. I'm not saying to cut him off completely. He can be fun, but be careful not to trust him too much. If he wants something, he might betray you." I kept in touch with Connie until I went off to college, but we never saw each other again. Still, her words echoed in my mind for many years. Over time, I forgot Connie's warnings about Bruce. I didn't see him doing anything wrong, and eventually I started to trust him again. Plus, after Connie's talk, Bruce, Pete, and I went to different colleges and only saw each other during the summer. We all had jobs in the summer, which made our time together even less. Even after Bruce took over the gardening business from his dad, everything seemed to be going well. My dad and I often visited the gardens, and we had no idea what Bruce was up to with the other places. Instead of going out, I just ordered pizza. It was still before 9 p.m. When Claire came home, I put my purse and keys away and asked her about her day. I wanted to know where she had dinner and who she met, the usual things we talked about. "Pizza," she said, smiling. I think my dinner was more interesting. I believed her. Then she sat down on the couch next to me and asked the big question. I hesitated before answering. "I think Bruce is going to end up in jail this time." Claire wasn't from Vero Beach. She grew up in Southern California, near Los Angeles in Orange County. Claire didn't want to move back to California. She felt there were too many strange laws and high taxes, which made it less appealing to live there. It was still a beautiful place, with amazing beaches, great wine, ski mountains, and beautiful national parks. It's a nice place to visit, but not somewhere you want to live. Middle Tennessee was perfect for us, and I felt lucky to have her. She came here to study at Vanderbilt University. We met, started dating, fell in love, and eventually got married. But she didn't know everyone I grew up with. She only knew Bruce and his wife from her trips to Vero. "What did he do to get arrested?" she asked. "That's the problem," I replied. "I think he took about $125,000 from the plantation's account for himself. I guess that's theft, but it gets tricky because he had legal access to the money at the time. Plus, It seems he sold our farm equipment to his friends who own other plantations. We think so, I said. But they might say he just borrowed the equipment for a good reason. The sheriff's department is checking into it now. Bruce also pretended he had the power of attorney for me and made fake documents to go along with that. He tried to take money from her main bank account, but it didn't work. I still wasn't sure how to describe his actions. Attempted theft, fraud. The important thing is selling our plantation, and we need more details on that. I think we'll find he used the fake power of attorney to convince real estate agents to help him, so he definitely committed fraud and theft. And I have a bad feeling that this is just the start of what he's done, I added. Wow, Claire said in surprise. And this is the man you thought was your friend? I felt a bit embarrassed. Yes, I thought he was a friend, but no friend would act like that. I used to date a woman named Connie Lopez who hung out with Bruce, too. She once told me that he was a user and would eventually betray me. I ignored her warnings, but now I see she was right. I'm really sorry, Dave, Claire said. I don't know what to say. I don't know either, I replied. But for now, I need to push my feelings aside and try to fix as much as I can. Thank goodness George called Pete, and Pete had the good sense to reach out to me and ask what was happening. This isn't just a sudden choice. Bruce must have been planning this for a long time. I think he thought he could act so fast that it would all be over before anyone noticed. We talked a bit more, but we were just going in circles with no new information. So Claire and I decided to go to bed. We cuddled for a while, and I think she slept a bit better than I did, but she was still uneasy. I lay there planning what I needed to do first thing in the morning, which was to make some calls. I called Bubba, and he had good news. The sheriff's agricultural theft unit found 2 of the 3 tractors Bruce sold, and they took them back while I reported the theft. They were tracking down the 3rd tractor because Barbara remembered the last buyer's name. He had a farm in the middle of the state off Highway 60, which runs between Vero and Tampa Bay. They reached out to the sheriff in that county to get permission to work together and retrieve the last tractor. That's about $110,000 worth of equipment we won't need to replace. Bubba was also checking to see if any other equipment was missing. He confirmed that our farm workers had all been paid. A quick call to the bank confirmed my worry that Bruce wouldn't come back to cash in on the main account. Finally, I called Pete and agreed to meet again for breakfast to talk about our situation. I kissed Claire and got ready to leave, making sure she wouldn't be bored. Dave, I brought a couple of books to read and my laptop. I'll check with work to see if anything needs my attention. Pete was already at our little cafe for breakfast. The cafe wasn't fancy, but the food was great, and it was a favorite spot for local farmers. As I took a bite of my sausage and avocado omelet, I looked across the table at Pete and saw a look of panic in his eyes. "Wow, you look upset, man," a voice said. I recognized it. It was Matt, a local farmer I went to school with. I didn't know him well. He was on the football team, and Bruce was much closer to him. Matt was a big guy, about 6'4" and weighing over 250 pounds, maybe even 275 now. He was really strong. Back in high school, he could lift more than anyone else on the team, and there were some big boys there. I didn't turn around or react. I just said, "Hey, Matt, long time no see. What's got you so worked up? Come sit and have a cup of coffee. I'll even pay," he said. He sat down beside Pete so he could look me in the eyes. Pete seemed really uneasy. "Do you know what you did?" Matt asked, almost shouting. The waitress, who knew all of us, brought Matt a cup of strong black coffee. "I really don't know," I said. "So why don't you tell me?" "I bought a John Deere tractor from you, and then the sheriff's office came and said it was stolen and took it away." "Oh," I sighed, starting to understand. "Well, Matt, there's just one problem with your story. I never sold you anything, and I never told anyone, including Bruce, that he could sell that tractor. He's your plantation manager, right?" "He was," Matt replied, "but our agreement didn't allow him to sell farm equipment without my permission." "He said he had your permission," Matt mentioned. "So he lied," I replied. "How much did you pay for the tractor?" $20,000 in cash, he answered. "Let me get this straight. You paid $20,000 for a nearly new tractor that costs at least $160,000, and you don't think there's something wrong?" "I knew I was getting a great deal," he said, "but he told me you were selling the plantation and just wanted to get rid of the equipment quickly for cash. I'm sorry, Matt, but you were buying stolen property. You might lose your $20,000 if you don't find Bruce and get it back from him. Don't count on it. I think he already decided that Vero is not a safe place for him. Well, it's easy for you to say. It's not your money, Matt said. By now he was calming down, maybe trying to change his anger. Understand, Matt. He stole at least $25,000 from me and probably more that I haven't found yet. Bruce tricked all his old friends. Matt nodded. You know, Dave, he was a bit of a shady guy back in high school. Sometimes things would go missing from lockers or cars. Everyone thought it might be Bruce, but no one ever caught him. In the end, the missing items weren't valuable enough for anyone to report it. I know what you mean. I often saw him doing something shady, but I could never prove it. He always had an excuse ready. Suddenly, Matt stood up. Where are you going, Matt? I asked. I'm going to check a few spots where Bruce might be hiding, where we used to hang out when we were young. We would drink and have a good time. Let me know if you find him, I said. We exchanged numbers and he promised to keep me posted, though he didn't know what shape Bruce would be in when he got there. Pete and I waved goodbye as Matt left. Well, I said to Pete, I almost hope Matt doesn't find him. He could end up in trouble, and we might only find pieces of him in one of the irrigation canals. I agree, Pete replied. I felt thankful that Pete was with me to help sort out the mess Bruce had caused. He was a lawyer, and even though we were friends, he charged for his time. I wanted to make sure I was using his help wisely and not wasting it. So I asked, what should we do now, Pete? Should we file a formal complaint with the sheriff's office? He said, not just yet. This is a serious crime, and I want some assistant district attorneys to be there when we provide our statements. You know there will be several statements, right? I replied. Absolutely, he said. You go check the plantation for any more issues, and I'll wait for your call when you set up an appointment at the sheriff's department. He added, there's one more thing. I have a paralegal who is looking for the notary who signed the fake power of attorney. She's likely involved in the scam, Pete continued. She might have helped Bruce create it. She may have seen more than one power of attorney. If she is a lawyer, she might have access to templates to create them. It's easy to find templates online in just 10 minutes. Anyway, I need to include her in our statements. That made sense to me. Okay, Pete, call me when you want me at the sheriff's office. I'll check on the plantation. We went our separate ways for a bit. I didn't share with Pete, but I planned to visit the old plantation house where Bruce's family used to live to see if anyone was around. When I arrived at the plantation, Baba had everything organized and running smoothly again. It was still too early in the year for harvesting, so we were mostly preparing for the season. Bubba walked over to my rental car as I pulled up. Hey, boss, when will we get our tractors back? He asked. Honestly, I don't know yet. Pete and I are going to the sheriff's office later to give our statements. I'm not sure how long they'll keep them before returning them, I replied. Okay, we need them now, Bubba said, sounding a little frustrated. I was going to use the mower on the fields and cut the weeds again. I wanted to start with the Hamlin oranges, since those will be the first ones we gather. Hamlin oranges are an early variety used mostly for juice. We discussed work details for about 15 minutes before I asked him a more sensitive question. Bubba, did you have time to check the plantation for anything missing? I inquired. Of course, boss. I think we're missing about 50 of the 60 harvest boxes, he continued. I know this because we keep track, and that's the difference between our count at the end of last season and now. That's not good, I said. Bubba nodded in agreement. The missing plastic crates had our plantation's name burned into them, so no one else could use them for picking and shipping citrus. This meant whoever stole them planned to melt them back into raw plastic. Each box of harvest crates cost us a little over $160 new, and the most anyone could get from Gifford's plastic contents was about $118 a box. It was a big loss for us, but if they were stolen, that was $9,500 that was gone, and it would have cost us over $13,000 to replace everything. This was considered grand theft. Even though we stopped the fake sale of the plantation, our losses kept adding up. The good news was that if Bubba was right and nothing else was missing, we still had most of what we needed to keep the plantation going. The computers, important papers, and office supplies were still in the office. Bruce might have had his phone paid for by our plantation, but I figured it was either in a ditch or left somewhere for anyone to find. That reminded me. I needed to turn off this phone. I didn't want to pay for calls to Central or South America or the Caribbean. It took me about 5 minutes to check. It hadn't made any calls in the last week. Bubba changed the locks on the gate and the office to stop anyone from sneaking in at night. My next visit could be tough and maybe even risky. I was heading through the plantation to the other side where there was an old ranch house. This house is where Bruce's family lived. It could be empty, or I might find Bruce with a gun. So I grabbed my .4 or .5 and put it in the car. Some places were easy to get to. As I drove up to the house that my grandfather built, I felt a wave of memories. The outside of the house still looked the same as when my family lived there. The walls were made of light beige concrete blocks, and the roof sloped down to a covered porch that went around most of the house. If you looked closely, you could see that all the windows were new, with double glass to keep the sun from making it too hot inside. This made them shiny, so I couldn't see if anyone was moving around inside. The inside of the house had been made modern 3 different times. There was a new kitchen that flowed into the dining area and living room without any walls in between. There were 4 bedrooms at the back of the house that I couldn't see from where I was. The bedrooms were part of the original house, but there was a big addition that more than doubled the space, moving not just the bedrooms but also the game room and office to the back. It was a nice place, and I had to admit that Bruce always kept it looking good. I parked in front of the house, and before I even got out of the car, the door opened. It was Consuela, Bruce's wife from Venezuela. Yes, Bruce still liked the same types of women. There didn't seem to be anyone else around, so I stepped out and stood next to the car, partly hidden by the open door. Car bodies don't keep you safe from bullets, but I could hide behind the engine, which would be much better. Consuela spotted me and came over to my car. She was a very pretty woman with almost shoulder-length black hair and a nice figure. She had a smaller waist and a fuller bottom, not too big, just a bit slimmer than Kim Kardashian. "David," she said, saying my name with a soft accent. "I thought you were coming," I replied. She looked sad and said, "Bruce isn't here, you know. It's been more than a week." Her voice trembled like she was about to cry. "I don't know where he is." I wasn't surprised if Bruce had let everyone down. Why not leave his wife behind? "David, sit down. We need to talk," she said. I agreed. Consuela's family moved to the United States when she was 12, so she spoke both English and Spanish very well. Her English had a bit of an accent. She met Bruce while they were both studying at the University of Florida. She was working on a business degree, which matched well with what Bruce needed for his work. I never truly believed Bruce loved anyone but himself, but I always thought Consuela was different. Now, I wasn't so sure. I didn't know how to feel or what to think about her. She seemed honest. She worked for Bruce's company, managing the business side while he took care of the farm. She also helped communicate with the workers by translating for the mostly Spanish-speaking teams. We walked into the ranch house, and I felt a little uneasy, worried that it might be a trap. Consuela sat at a small kitchen table with 2 chairs and motioned for me to sit down. There was an open bottle of wine and a half-full glass on the table. It was still morning, not the right time for drinking. She asked if I wanted some wine or if I'd like soda or coffee. I chose a diet soda, which she pulled from the fridge. Looking directly at me with tears in her eyes, she asked, "What's going on?" I answered, "I don't know. Why don't you tell me?" "Bruce left a week ago and I haven't heard from him since," she said, starting to cry. "I don't know if he's okay or if he's hiding from me. I think he's with someone else, so maybe he just left me and the boys." "Where are the boys?" I asked, thinking Bruce wouldn't really leave his sons. "My parents have them until I figure out my next step," she replied. "So why do you think Bruce might be gone?" I asked. "It's a long story, just start from the beginning," I said. Consuela took a deep breath and paused, then filled her glass again. "It all started about 6 months ago. Bruce told me he had a plan to help us become wealthy. I asked him what he meant, and he said he couldn't share it all. I then asked him directly if he was thinking about doing something wrong. He laughed and promised me it wasn't anything illegal. I pressed him for a hint about his plan, since it also involved me and his son. Finally, he revealed that he was working on a project to create big farms for oranges and coffee in Central America. These farms would be different from the ones already there because they would use modern machines and produce organic crops to sell in the U.S. at prices like regular crops grown here. He mentioned he was keeping it secret because once the time was right, we would close our business here and move to a ranch in Central America. He didn't tell me which country it was in. I had to keep it quiet because it was sensitive information. He mentioned he was talking to the local government to get a lot of money for the project, but if people found out, the funds might disappear. It sounded shady to me, but he said that's how business works there. He also wanted to avoid losing his job at the farms. He felt if they knew he was planning to leave, they would replace him faster than he expected. He needed my support to set everything up. I wasn't sure what he meant, but I agreed to help him however I could, which made him very happy. He smiled through his tears, but I needed to stay strong and keep listening. I felt guilty about everything, but I promised Bruce I would help him. Soon after our talk one evening, Bruce asked me to take the kids to my parents' house because he was having 2 bankers over to discuss business and wanted to avoid interruptions. He invited 2 men, one older and one younger. They wore nice suits, and we started drinking. It seemed they were more interested in getting to know each other than in actual business matters. I thought they were from Panama, a place known for its banking privacy and some financial troubles. Bruce mentioned they had a flight to catch in half an hour, so he asked them to excuse us, and we went to our bedroom. By then, we had all enjoyed a few drinks. He asked me to change into a dress and to wear stockings and heels. I felt uncomfortable, but I did what he asked. Bruce then went back to the living room and played some lively music. He called me out to dance for our guests. I felt embarrassed, but I went out to dance in my outfit. Eventually, Bruce told me to return to the bedroom and wait while he helped our guests to their car. I could hear their voices, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. It sounded like they were making plans to come back to the U.S. Consuela took another sip of her wine and looked away for a moment, lost in thought. 2 weeks later, Bruce told me that the bankers would be back with papers for him to sign. I told him I didn't want to go through what he made me do before. He said we needed to work with these people and that they were relying on me to be friendly again. We had a few drinks while we waited, but I still said no. He insisted I take a pill to help me relax. I took it, and my mind got a bit cloudy. He told me again that we would become rich if I just helped him. Finally, I agreed to help. Just then, a rental car with 2 men arrived. They walked up to the house and Bruce let them in. He asked me to take their jackets and hang them in the hallway. I did as he said. Then Bruce made us all mix drinks with tequila. We raised our glasses to our future success. At that point, I felt very relaxed and didn't worry about anything. He told me to put my thigh-high stockings and high heels back on, and I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to dance for these 2 guys again. But it didn't bother me like it used to. I thought if they wanted to see me dressed this way again, it wouldn't really hurt anyone. I changed and went back to the living room ready for the performance. But when I got there, everything felt different. Bruce played some lively salsa music and I started dancing. The 2 men and Bruce surrounded me, getting into the rhythm too. At that moment, I found it funny dancing with 3 guys who were all dressed. Then Bruce told them they could touch me. I felt so confused from the pill and the tequila that I didn't even speak up. After that, they went to the table and started signing papers. Then they left. Bruce came back into the room, hugged me, and told me I was the final piece of the plan. He said I did what he needed me to do that night. Then he helped me to bed and we spent the night together. Consuela began to cry again and took another sip from her glass. At that moment, I realized that I was being used by Bruce to get money for his project, and he hadn't even explained what it was all about. I suspected he was not truthful when he said it wasn't about drugs. When I heard your car pull up, I feared it would be Bruce with more men for me to entertain. You know we manage 4 different plantations here, yours and 3 others. The other owners hardly come by, only once or twice each year. I believed they owned the plantations mainly for tax benefits and only visited for vacations with their families, claiming it was for business. Each of the remaining owners has been visiting their plantations about 2 weeks apart. Bruce would bring them here, and we'd have a drink. He would give me another pill to help me relax, and then we would all be together without any worries. I realized Bruce was just using me to get money for his project. He mentioned that maybe you would join us, and that you and he could have an experience together with me. Or he suggested that you could bring your wife, and we could trade partners. He thought it would be thrilling to see me spend time with your wife. I had never been with another woman. With you? Maybe I wouldn't mind that too much. But with other men, they were older and not pleasant, I thought. Then last week, Bruce said he had to do something and just left. He never came back. He didn't call or show up at the plantations. He just left us behind. I cut into her talking. He said that if I wanted to swap partners or have an experience with him, we could do it. But I told him clearly that Claire and I were not interested. She nodded. I didn't want to tell her everything about what Bruce had done, but I felt it was important to warn her. As far as I know, Bruce isn't involved in anything illegal, but he has done some things that could get him in serious trouble. So don't be surprised if people from the sheriff's department come to speak with you. We are officially ending the contract with Bruce's company that managed your plantation. You will be getting a letter about this soon. I saw worry in her eyes. This house is yours. We were allowed to live here while managing your plantation. Are you going to kick me and the kids out now that you fired Bruce? Don't worry. We might have to move you later, but if you're telling the truth and weren't part of Bruce's actions, we will take care of you and the boys in any way we can. A couple more things. Do you have my phone number? She checked her phone and confirmed she had it. All right. If Bruce shows up, call me. And one last thing. Has Bruce ever mentioned the name of that woman you think he's seeing? No, she said. But I think she's from Central America, maybe from Costa Rica. Well, let me know if you find out anything else. Consuela stood up and hugged me. Thank you, David. You are one of the good people in this world. As I walked back through the plantation, no more than 2 minutes had passed when my cell phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw Pete was calling. Pete, what's up? Let's go to the sheriff's department. Teresa Diva, one of the assistant district attorneys, will meet us when we file charges. I'll be there soon. It took me about 15 minutes to reach the sheriff's office, and Pete was already waiting outside. Almost right away, a government car pulled up and a woman about 35 got out. Teresa, this is Dave Stevens. Dave, this is Teresa Diva, one of the assistant district attorneys. We shook hands and exchanged friendly words. Teresa was there because Pete asked her to help keep everyone on the same page. There were many crimes to discuss, and likely many people who would be charged. Pete assured me that she was skilled and serious about fighting crime. Teresa agreed it was smart to involve her from the beginning. Together, we went into the sheriff's office, where we were taken to a meeting room. We needed to explain our case against Bruce and some other people we didn't know yet for several crimes. The sheriff's deputies had already completed paperwork about the theft and bad sale of farm equipment. According to Bob's statement, they had seized 2 tractors that were sold in the area, and a third one was being brought back as evidence. Pete told them he had proof showing Bruce didn't have the authority to sell anything except fruits from the farm without special permission. I asked how long it would take to get the tractors back. I was told it would take a few days to check our ownership papers. They found information on the tractors and planned to send a forensic expert to take photos as evidence. The deputy mentioned that some people who bought the tractors were thinking about suing me to get their money back. The deputies at the scene said they might arrest those buyers for having stolen property, since it was clear they paid much less than the tractors were worth. Hearing that seemed to stop discussions about suing me. They would have to accept that they paid Bruce. They could file a complaint against Bruce for tricking them. As for what Bruce did at the bank, we couldn't charge him with theft for cleaning out the transaction account since he had the right to access that money. I was told later I could try to claim my money back, but I wasn't sure that would work. They could accuse him of fraud and trying to steal money from the main account by using a fake power of attorney. Lastly, there was the issue of Bruce selling the plantation. It was a bit more complicated to decide what charges to apply since we were stopping the plantation's transfer, but stopping a theft doesn't erase the attempt. This marked the end of our first meeting. We made it clear to the deputy that if we found more crimes, we would come back. De Silva thanked us for the information and suggested that when the sheriff's office sent the documents to the prosecutor, they might add more charges. After that, she went back to her office. I had a feeling that none of this would matter because Bruce was not going to stick around to be arrested. I expected him to sell his truck and cover his tracks while we tried to figure out exactly what he had done. He could easily get a new identity and move far away, hundreds or even thousands of miles, and then disappear. At this point, all his crimes were about property and weren't as important as other serious crimes like murder, assault, or kidnapping. There wouldn't be long bulletins or police updates for the officers on the streets that lasted more than a day or two. Sadly, there were too many other big crimes happening. I followed Pete to our next visit, Andy Lopez's real estate office, Properties by Andy. Both Pete and I had met Andy at different events. We weren't friends, just casual acquaintances. When we entered his office, a young woman who looked sharp and professional greeted us. She smiled and seemed a bit let down to learn that we weren't there to buy property, but to see Andy. Andy came out, and when he spotted Pete, he rolled his eyes and said, "Pete, what a mess!" I replied, "I'm sorry about that, Andy, but it was great for you that we stopped a fake deal." "Yes, you're right. Let's go to my office. Would you like some coffee?" We said yes, and he called out to the woman, "Carolyn, could you bring 3 coffees and a tray to my office?" We sat and chatted for a bit. He asked Pete about his family, and they talked about mine since we no longer lived in Vero. I shared news about Claire and the kids. Soon, Carolyn came in with 3 mugs of coffee and all the extras. I took a couple of sweeteners for mine. Pete added cream and sugar, and Andy liked his black. Just after we finished preparing our drinks, a young woman walked into the office. She looked about 24 or 25 years old. Andy introduced her as his daughter, Estella. She had some papers in her hands. "Hi, Pete. Nice to see you again. I really wanted this deal to go through, though. $5 million for the plantation. Dad asked me to make copies of all the completed documents for you." "Thanks, Estella. Please keep the originals together and in a safe place. They'll probably need to be used as evidence," I explained. She took a seat in an extra chair. "To be honest, Pete, everything seemed fine to me. Dad told me that Dave's family wanted to sell the plantation, and I knew Jake Steer had been looking for this land for years. I accepted the order before it was even listed in the MLS." She pulled out a copy of the certified power of attorney and handed it to Pete. "I thought this gave Bruce the right to act for the Bates family. That's usually what he does, buys fertilizer, hires pickers, and runs the packing plants." This wasn't surprising. Many groves near the beach have been sold to developers, and I think 3 have sold in the last 6 months. Something she said caught my attention, but at that moment, I couldn't quite grasp it. Andy and his daughter told us that the deal didn't happen and it never got listed in the MLS. Estella looked a bit deep in thought. I asked her what was on her mind. With a laugh, she said, "Do you know that a 6% commission for selling a house, or even just a 3% listing fee, would make my year? Imagine my new car." I nodded, adding up in my head the commission from $150,000 to $300,000. But then, Estella had a different thought. She quietly muttered to herself, "That guy tricked me. I trusted him, and now it's all slipping away again." We left the office and found another place where Bruce had left issues. Since it was getting late, Pete went home and I went back to the family cottage on the island. When I got there, Claire was waiting for me. "How did it go?" she asked. "Well," I replied, "we're trying to fix things as best we can, but it looks like we're short about $125,000, or more specifically, $124,950 from the account because he had access to it. He will have other charges against him, and when he gets caught, he could end up in jail for a long time." I also visited Consuela. She said she hadn't seen or heard from Bruce in a week. He mentioned some project that was supposed to make them rich from a ranch in Central America. She seemed scared he might get into serious trouble, worrying they could end up in a bad situation. I suspect that over the last 6 months, Bruce has been selling this idea to possible partners and investors, pressuring her to keep her banks happy and even getting her to do things she wasn't comfortable with. She looked really upset about giving in to him. But you know how Bruce is. He promised her big rewards and made her feel guilty, saying if she didn't help, it would be her fault if his dreams failed. At that point, Claire interrupted me. "Dave," she said, "I never told you this, but before we got married, Bruce suggested something really uncomfortable. He thought we could all be together, that it would be the best night of my life. He even said after that it could happen again, and he hinted that once we were married, it could be like that when we were here." I was shocked and disgusted that someone I considered a friend would say such things. I never brought it up to you because I thought he might have been drunk, and the next day he acted like nothing happened, so I didn't think much of it. But I hope you noticed that I always kept my distance from Bruce. I always stayed close to you when we needed to be together. I noticed something was off, and my gut told me, Bruce wasn't being completely honest. He was a bit too friendly and touchy, more than most women would like. I stayed with him because, like his father, he was a good grove manager. But this new discovery made me angrier and felt like a betrayal. He might have been drinking, but I believe he remembered everything he said. Maybe he thought he could suggest an idea to her that she might act on later. He didn't really know my wife. As Connie Lopez told me years ago, Bruce was never my friend. I changed the topic and told Claire we were having dinner with Pete and his wife, Brenda. Brenda was someone Claire really liked, so it was a good chance to chat with her. I reminded Claire that today she and Pete were not doing business. She agreed. Claire mentioned that Pete promised Brenda the same thing, so we all enjoyed a nice dinner at a great seafood restaurant near the ocean. The seafood was fresh, coming right off the dock, and the chefs had years of experience. I admired their skills. I never cooked seafood as well at home. Most of the year it's warm in Florida, so we took a nice walk on the beach. This time of year, the bugs weren't too bad and the weather had cooled down from the summer heat. It was lovely to walk by the waves. It brought back memories of my teenage days in Vero with friends. But I had to deal with my own troubles back at the beach house. When Claire and I got ready for bed, I saw her waiting for me and I felt happy. Afterwards, I wanted to talk to Claire about Consuela. Claire, have you ever thought about a situation like what Consuela had to deal with? She smiled and said, Dave, let me handle a few things first. I think we all have dreams sometimes, but they are just dreams. First, regarding women, a few women have shown interest in me throughout my life, but not since we got married. I think I look too happy with you for that. I tried to kiss another girl when I was about 14, but it didn't feel right to me, and I had no interest in trying it again. As for a situation with another man, that's a bit different. I think many women think about it at some point, but their ideas aren't the same as men's. Then she turned to look at me. Did you ever have a threesome with Bruce when you were younger? Claire knew about some of the close moments I had before I met her. No, Bruce and I often spent time at night with our partners in the same room. But it was for work. We could only afford one room and we never had threesomes or traded partners. Sometimes, if one of us stopped seeing a certain partner, the other might try dating her, but it never happened in the same room at the same time. If Bruce was having a threesome, it was with me. Claire paused for a moment before changing the subject slightly. Have you ever dreamed about a threesome? Of course, I said. My fantasies were always about being with two women. There were a couple of times in college when I thought I could get close to it. Being with two women at once. But something always got in the way, and it never happened. Like that one time when a girl I wanted to bring to my room got sick and threw up on herself. That quickly ended any thoughts of being together. They both left me to clean up. I laughed, remembering that story. Have you ever thought about inviting me to spend a night with another man? No, Claire said for many reasons. I just never thought of it. First, since I met you, I've been quite attached and a bit jealous. I would probably get angry if I saw another man too close to you. I'm just too protective. The second reason is that even talking about being with someone else, even if we never do it, might hurt your feelings and make you doubt me. I couldn't bear that. Well, at least you answered that right, Claire said with a laugh. I thought for a moment. I think that's why Consuela feels so let down right now. Bruce started treating her like someone he paid to be with, and that made her feel he didn't care for her the way she cared for him. Then why do you think she acted that way? I asked. I think there are a few reasons. Some Latino women are raised to please their husbands and follow their wishes. This usually doesn't include things like being with other men, since many Latino men like me wouldn't allow it. Remember when she thought Bruce was seeing another woman? For her, it was a way to show him that she was the right one for him, not anyone else. I could be wrong, though, of course. Claire and I talked a bit more about other topics until she fell asleep. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep, thinking about everything that happened. The next morning, as Claire and I were having breakfast, the phone rang. It was Pete. Dave, am I interrupting? No, just finishing breakfast. I wanted to share some news I discovered. Remember how we thought the notary who signed those documents was part of a scam? Well, I found her. Not her current location, but where she used to work. She was an assistant and notary for another real estate company in town. She helped with paperwork for agents and did some minor office tasks. She just got her state notary certificate. but she stopped coming to work about a week ago. Her name was Claudia Rivera. We looked into her background and found that she had a past conviction that was cleared after her probation. She went by Claudia Riva before. Can you guess what she was convicted of? Forgery. Oh, one more thing. She wasn't Costa Rican. She was from Panama. People think she had a secret relationship with Bruce. It's quite something. I agree. Have you reported this to the prosecutor? I'm calling from my car because I'm on my way to drop off the documents we gathered. Great. Pete, I think I'll stop by Bruce's parents' house and see if they know where he is. Okay, just let me know what they say. I don't expect them to know much since Bruce doesn't share details with them. His parents are very honest people. Sure, I know it's unlikely, but I'll give it a try. We'll talk later. I was on speakerphone, so I made sure to be discreet. I stood up and gave her a quick kiss. No need to get up. Enjoy your breakfast, I told her. Okay, good luck. As I drove to Bruce's parents' house in a nearby retirement community, I wondered what had gone wrong. How had Bruce lost control and messed up his future? His business seemed to be doing well, and so did his wife and kids, at least until he made some bad choices. What had changed? Did it have anything to do with the new woman in his life? Was it worth all the trouble? I didn't think so. Bruce had never been loyal to one woman, and I doubted that would change. Maybe one day I would meet her and understand what he saw in her, though I might see her in some unfortunate circumstances. When I arrived at the small house and parked in the driveway, Bruce's parents, Jim and Maggie, came out to greet me. The cottage was nice and probably built about 10 years ago, new when they bought it in this community for those over 55. Maggie came up and hugged me tightly. "Dave, it's so nice to see you." Jim shook my hand and welcomed me inside. They offered me coffee and Maggie's homemade blueberry muffins, but I politely declined, saying I had already eaten. We made small talk about my parents and how my work was going at the ranch. I asked about their life in the retirement community and whether they enjoyed being grandparents. After a bit, they looked at me knowing why I was really there. Dave, the deputy, visited us yesterday to ask where Bruce is. We should have told him what we're telling you. We don't know and haven't heard from him in about 2 weeks. It's not unusual for Bruce. He doesn't call or visit us very often. Even though we live just 5 miles from the Grove, kids at his age often don't keep in touch with their parents. I wondered if something had happened to make Bruce change so much. When I asked Jim, he replied that Bruce was diagnosed about 6 months ago. With what? I wanted to know. Maggie explained. It wasn't multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease. No, Bruce was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS, as it's known now. Not many people remember Lou Gehrig anymore. I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that." I didn't know much about ALS, but I remembered that the illness usually lasts around 3 to 5 years, though some recent treatments could extend that to 10. It is a cruel illness where your body weakens over time. You lose the ability to eat, and eventually you struggle to breathe and might suffocate. I thought that knowing such a dark future could make Bruce lose his sense of right and wrong. It was hard to say if Bruce ever followed the rules like most people did. We talked a bit more about Bruce's situation, and a piece of the puzzle came together. His parents mentioned that about 6 weeks ago he talked about starting a bucket list and that they might not hear from him much. When they asked what was on it, he talked about a 2-week trip to Hawaii, maybe Fiji or Samoa, hunting a bear in Alaska or a lion in Africa, and visiting parts of Europe he had never seen. Nothing was set in stone, just ideas he had. Bruce's parents, who were around 75 and still doing well, felt sad that their son might die before them. They took comfort in knowing they still had Consuela and the grandkids. I couldn't help but smile a little when I heard this. I thought Consuela might take the kids and leave Vero to forget about Bruce. As I was getting ready to leave, Jim told me, "You know, we didn't raise him this way. I would never steal from those who trust me with their things." I nodded. "I understand, Jim. I've always thought you and Maggie were very decent people. Thanks for sharing this with me. At least I now see what might have led him to make these choices." As I stepped into my car, I saw a message from the sheriff telling me I could pick up my tractors. Knowing Bob needed them at the Grove, I drove straight to the parking lot and called Bubba to meet me there with one of the other workers. Bob was waiting at the parking lot entrance with the sheriff's deputy when I got there. The first thing we did was check the tractors for any damage and looked at the VIN numbers to make sure they matched the ones that had been stolen from the Grove. They were indeed the same tractors. I had to pay $135 a day for their release. 2 tractors had been there for 2 days, and the third one for just 1 day, which came to a total of $675 just to have my stolen property parked in a county lot. When I complained about the cost, the manager laughed and said, "Dave, be glad you're paying for farm equipment. If these were cars, it would be $1,150 a day. The county sets the rates and gives a discount for farm vehicles." I thanked him and said I understood. Still, I couldn't help but grumble a bit. After the paperwork was sorted out, Bubba, one of our employees, and I drove the tractors back to the Grove. Yes, you can drive tractors on county roads, but only slowly. That caused some traffic to build up behind us. Drivers cheered as we turned into the Grove's driveway. We parked the tractors so Raul and his team could quickly check the oil in the engines and the fuel in the tanks. After that, they would get back to work in the Grove. Bubba took one of the trucks and drove me back to the lot where I picked up my rental car. As I walked to the car, the sheriff's deputy in the parking lot waved me over. "The report on your tractor says Bruce McWilliams is the suspect in the theft," he said. I nodded, agreeing with him. I had just heard on the radio that one of our patrols stopped his truck in town about an hour ago. They pulled him over and found a 19-year-old in the driver's seat. He was on his way to the DMV to change the registration to his name. It seems McWilliams sold him the truck yesterday afternoon. The young man and his dad took a couple of weeks to set up a loan. They transferred the money yesterday and he signed the title transfer. The police let the young man go to finish the registration. "Thought you might want to know," the deputy said. I sighed quietly. Another chance to track down Bruce had slipped away, but I wasn't surprised. That truck probably earned him around $125,000. He'd be collecting as much cash as he could before going into hiding. When I called Pete, he was already aware of the truck. "Yes, Teresa, that assistant prosecutor called me to inform me, but it was an illegal transaction, so there's nothing we can do. However, she is keeping an eye out. Just for fun, she looked up Claudia Rivera's Toyota Camry in the DMV database. At least her license plate is now on the police radar. But her car is not like Bruce's truck. There are no flashy lights on it. Her car is a brown 4-door sedan, the type that people usually ignore. Bruce will probably show up at some point. Let's hope it's sooner rather than later. For now, we're only guessing about her situation. She might not be involved in Bruce's tricks, but I wasn't sure." After I hung up, I drove back to the cottage on the island. I thought Claire and I would have dinner there that night, then fly back home to Tennessee in a couple of days. I felt stuck. Everything was in the hands of the police and the prosecutor. When I got there and was just getting out of the rental car, Claire came running out of the house. "Dave, Consuela just called. She sounded really stressed. She was worried because she couldn't reach you. Your phone was busy and didn't go to voicemail. She asked you to call her back right away." I went inside before I made the call. "David," she whispered, as if scared someone might hear. "Those bankers from Panama called half an hour ago. They said their plane just landed in Miami and they'll be here tonight. I told them Bruce isn't here and I don't know where he is, but they said it didn't matter. They said Bruce told them to come and then I would give them a good evening. The Panamanians said Bruce mentioned spending time with me and they are excited for the same. They said they have something special for tonight. What should I do?" I thought about the situation. "Give me a minute to make a couple of calls and then Claire and I will come to the ranch," I said. "Okay," she replied, "but hurry." My first call was to Pete. "Pete, do you have the number for that assistant prosecutor?" "Yes, she's probably already left, but I have her personal number." I explained about the call from the Panamanian bankers. "I think it will take them about 2 hours to get here from Miami. We need someone with some pull with the sheriff." I shared my plan with Pete, and he said he would contact Teresa and they would be ready. Claire and I got back in the rental car and drove to the ranch. I saw Consuela looking out from behind the curtain to check if it was us before opening the door. When she opened it, relief was clear on her face. She walked over to hug us, so glad to see us. "Consuela," I said gently but firmly, "get your boys and take them to Bruce's parents for the night. They will love to have them, and Bruce hasn't taken the kids to them in a while. You take them there, and we will stay here to handle the men from Panama." "But David, I'm scared. I want to leave too." I quickly hugged her to soothe her. "We won't be alone, and we need you here to identify these men as the ones who were here before. Don't worry, you will be safe." I pulled out my Walther PPK pistol, loaded and ready if needed. I didn't plan to use it, but I wanted to be ready. I tried to comfort Consuela and told her I didn't think they would be here for at least an hour. I asked her to warm up the leftover ropa vieja we had for dinner and gave her a shot of tequila to help her relax. I didn't drink any because I wanted to stay alert in case something went wrong. Then we turned on the TV at a low volume. Almost an hour had gone by when we heard a car pull up to the house. I told Consuela what to do and how to act. She was wearing casual clothes, nothing fancy. I locked the screen door and Consuela stood behind it. I hid just out of sight beside her so I could get close if I needed to. A man got out of the car, and it was clear he had been drinking already. Consuela yelled at them. "What do you want? What are you doing here?" The man replied, "Hey there, are you ready to have some fun tonight? We've got some stuff for you. Let's get you happy now." Consuela replied firmly, "We're not having any fun. Go back to where you came from." They started to act aggressively. One of them said, No, Bruce sold you to us for the night. You're ours now, don't worry. You'll be free in the morning." "Are you threatening me?" Consuela asked. "I told you to leave. I will not be anyone's tonight or ever. Call the police if you want, but we're not going anywhere until we get what we want." "Are you threatening me?" she asked again. "I said leave or I'll call the police." "Go ahead and call," they replied. Suddenly, the lights around them flickered on. They tried to get back to their car, but 2 police cars blocked their way. "This is the police! You are under arrest! Put your hands on your head and do not make any sudden moves!" The men followed the instructions, kneeling down and then lying on the ground. Inside minutes, they were handcuffed while police dogs searched their car. The men had already admitted to having illegal pills, which allowed the search to happen. They found drugs and weapons on their bodies. There was enough in the car to prove they were dealing. When officers found several guns in the car, that sealed their fate. They were taken to the county jail for questioning. As the arrests were happening, De Silva walked up to the house. "Have you had enough of this action, Mr. Stevens?" Mrs. McWilliams answered first. "More than I ever want in my life," she said. I was being more careful. "Can you keep them here while you figure out what they had to do with Bruce's scam?" "Of course," he said. "We'll hold them as witnesses, just like you suggested." He looked back at the situation and shrugged. "Now we have charges against them for drugs and weapons. Trust me, once they understand how long they could be in trouble, one or both will start talking about Bruce. We'll learn what they were really doing and trading with him," she said, and then turned away. "Good night, everyone." I arranged for one of the deputies to take Consuela and me to her mother-in-law's house. There, she was reunited with her boys, and I found Claire, who was waiting. We said our goodbyes. Then Claire and I headed back to the island. It took several more days to sort things out in Florida before we could go home. We promoted Baba to the official Grove manager and gave him a raise. He was already doing most of the work, even with Bruce popping in occasionally for final decisions. Since Bruce's company closed down, we hired Consuela to take over some of Bruce's old tasks. After we harvested the crops and sent them to either the packing house or the juice plant, it was her job to make sure everything went smoothly. We sold the produce from our base in Tennessee, but Consuela made sure the fresh fruit was packed properly and that brokers arranged to transport it to the customers. Our products were top-notch because we waited until the sugar level was perfect before harvesting. This meant we waited until the oranges scored 21 or higher and grapefruits at least 11. Baba had to ensure that the fruit was fully ripe before picking, which was tricky for Florida citrus, especially grapefruits. Another important job for Consuela was managing our pride and joy, our juice line. We stopped selling our juices in bulk and created our own brand. We were recognized as a premium brand because our juice and FC were made from real Florida fruit, while our competitors often used cheaper fruit from places like Brazil or Mexico to add volume. We sold our juices to upscale stores, many in New York and Washington, and also to high-end restaurants. Additionally, we sent a good amount to our warehouse in Tennessee for sale across the state and nearby areas. Since we couldn't grow all the fruit we needed ourselves, Consuela also had to find juice from other producers. We worked with several trusted suppliers who sold all their juice to us, thanks to Consuela's help. We also placed her under Claire's supervision, so I stepped back from the process. Claire knew there would be no flirting involved, and Consuela knew I wouldn't treat her like Bruce had. Back home, Claire and I focused on our work in the groves and beyond. We handled produce from my father's ranch and a few local farmers. Over the years, we started distributing fresh vegetables and berries grown on farms in central Tennessee. Our team did a great job while we were away, but there were always some things that needed us to be there. Still, we kept hearing stories about Bruce and what he was up to. About 2 weeks after we returned home, Pete called one morning to tell me that the police had found Claudia Rivera's Toyota parked at Miami International Airport. It looked abandoned. Claudia and Bruce, with a Panamanian passport for her and an American one for him, had taken a flight to the Dominican Republic. After that, it was like they vanished. No one thought we would see them in the USA again. Later on, we learned that Bruce had sold 3 other groves to his clients. Developer Jake Steer did the sales legally because his clients had given Bruce power of attorney long ago. They weren't very involved in managing the groves, so they trusted him. But several months passed before anyone checked to see if those owners actually wanted to sell. The only good news was that some of the grove owners sued Steer, which made him hold on to his money and property long enough for him to file for bankruptcy. However, the owners never got their money or the groves back. In the end, Bruce still owed us less than $130,000, but he walked away with millions from selling the other groves. Following the money was almost impossible. First, it went to a bank in Panama. Yes, the same shady bankers who had been involved in other crimes. They helped Bruce with his scheme. Then the money disappeared into accounts. It first went to Costa Rica and then moved to the Cayman Islands. Over and over, it was transferred from one place to another. Eventually, the trail went cold, leaving the old grove owners to sorrow over their lost property. They might have claimed some of the money on their tax returns, but I'm not sure how that would work. I received a call from a man in New Jersey who owned one of the groves, asking if I had learned anything new about Bruce. He also wanted to know how our grove was safe from Bruce's wrongdoings while others weren't. I told him it was partly luck and that I grew up in Vero, so local friends would inform me if something seemed off. He was polite, but I could feel something uneasy even over the phone. He asked me to call him if I found out anything new about Bruce. I took his number and promised I would. The former grove owners weren't the only ones looking for Bruce. More than 2 years went by without any news. Then I got a call from Consuela. She had heard from her Latino friends that Bruce was very sick and in the later stages of ALS, but he was still able to take care of himself. It was said that he traveled to Canada to get long-term help from their healthcare system. As his health got worse, he was trying to get around the rules again. This rumor might not have mattered if someone hadn't overheard a conversation about a hotel in a small town near Quebec City. After thinking it over, and even though it felt pointless after all these years, I decided to go to Canada. I wanted to face Bruce, hoping there was some truth to the rumor. 2 days later, I arrived at the hotel and asked about a man who I thought might be staying there. The hotel manager was worried about his guests' privacy, but a couple of bills in my hand not only proved that Bruce was staying at the hotel, but also got me the key to his room. He was at dinner when I got there, but he would be back soon. I sat in the dark, waiting for him. When the door opened, Bruce walked in without noticing me at first, but when he turned on the light and saw me, he jumped. "God, David, you scared me! Hi, Bruce! It's been a long time!" Bruce sat down in the chair across from me. "Dave, you look good," he said. "Bruce, you look terrible, if I'm being honest." Bruce looked thin and worn out, much older than he really was. "Yeah," he sighed. "It's rough. The doctors say I might only have a year, maybe 2 if I'm lucky. This disease really changes you. I can only eat soft food now, lots of soups and baby food, but at least I can still feed myself." He continued, "I don't know when, but I might need a feeding tube. Thankfully, Canada's health service will take care of me without charge until the end." I told him I had heard that the health service was encouraging people with terminal illnesses to let them go to sleep permanently. "I've heard that too," he said. "I don't think I can just accept it when it gets this bad. I don't want to go to sleep and never wake up." Bruce then changed the topic. So, are you here to take me away? To turn me into the authorities? No, not at all. You didn't get much from us. We've fixed and rebuilt most of what you did wrong, I replied. And what's that? He asked, curious. I just want to hear why this all happened from you, I said. Do you want to record my confession? To use my words in some court? No, really. I want to know why you betrayed all your friends from childhood. I want to understand how you made your parents feel ashamed of you and hurt their lifelong friends. I want to understand why you first broke your wife's trust and then left her and your boys all alone, I said. Bruce chuckled softly. You really want to know, huh? All right, I'll explain it my way, but it's a long tale going back quite a while. I nodded, saying, I have time. He laughed again, probably more than I do. Then Bruce grew serious. Leaning back in his chair and closing his eyes, he began to share his story. One day, I looked up what a psychopath and a sociopath are. I'm not sure which one I fit into or if I belong in both categories. I think it began when I became a teenager. I remember thinking that rules were meant for foolish people. I viewed those who believed in doing the right thing as foolish, even my parents. I understood that I had to keep my true self hidden from everyone. If I did that, I could get away with almost anything until it all caught up with me in the end. My only rule? Be clever. Don't get caught. A lot of the time, though, I acted without thinking. If I saw something I wanted, I just took it. At some point, I realized that if I kept this up, I would eventually be caught. So I knew I needed a plan, my own set of rules. They weren't to follow society's demands, but to protect myself. I called this my main goal. First, don't be greedy. For example, if I found a woman's jewelry box, I wouldn't take the most valuable piece or something unique. I wouldn't touch any family heirlooms. Instead, I'd take something like a set of gold earrings or a simple ring with a few small stones. Items that could take a long time to be missed, if they were missed at all. People would think they lost them and wouldn't be able to do anything about it, just holding on to vague memories, like that gun you found when I was selling things from my house in Fort Pierce. That was a perfect case. The gun was tucked away in a box on one of the boats at the harbor, hidden beneath some clothes where no one could see it unless they were looking hard. I could tell that the boat's owner hadn't used it in ages. I'm not sure if he ever realized it was gone. Even if he looked for it, he might think he just misplaced it and couldn't recall where he put it. You almost caught me that time. I didn't expect you to arrive, and by then the gun was long gone. I know you were suspicious, but I had my story ready, and you believed me. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but I managed to fool everyone, and I had my share of fun with women. But that's a whole different story. I've always found Latinas very appealing. Even after I got married, I still saw other women. Sometimes I would pretend to be friends with some of the boys' mothers. Remember Matt from the football team? I did this a few times with his mom. She enjoyed it, even though she wasn't Latina. She was quite adventurous and liked to have fun. The truth is, it was easy to get what I wanted from them. But Consuela was special. She was smart, and since I wanted to start a family, I treated her differently. I married her, which made her believe I truly cared about her. While I still had my freedom, I tried to behave myself out of respect for her. She was just one of those people in my life I could enjoy whenever I felt like it. Then everything changed. I've always been active and fit, so when I started having trouble with my balance and strength, I knew something was wrong, and I went to see a doctor. He sent me to a specialist who cautiously suggested I might have ALS. He said it would take time to confirm, but deep down, I felt he was right. Hearing that news felt like a terrible weight. There seemed to be little hope. The treatments offered didn't really add years to life, just a few extra months. I was told I would only have about 3 to 5 years left before my body would stop working, and that thought made me so angry. Bruce was quiet for a whole minute after I shared this. I told my parents, but asked them not to tell anyone, not even Consuela, until we were completely sure. I had already been with Claudia for 6 months when I learned about my ALS. Claudia had a high sex drive and was quite bold. It amazed me how daring she could be. The idea to sell some land came from her first. I mentioned I had permission from the owners of 3 pieces of land I managed. She got excited and started thinking about how much we could get from selling the land. She worked at a real estate agency and knew some developers looking to buy land for housing in the area. Through her, I met Jake Steer. We sat down to talk about the land I could sell. He figured he could gather about $115 million from investors if I sold all 3 plots. At that point, we hadn't even thought about future growth because I was already aware that a long-term plan was in place. I felt uncertain because if I sold, it would be a one-time thing with no chance to get the land back. But then Claudia convinced me. I hadn't told my wife about my ALS, but I did share it with Claudia. She argued that there were treatments available in Europe that the FDA doesn't allow in the US in countries like her home in Panama. Those treatments weren't as tightly controlled. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that no one really follows the rules, or some officials can be persuaded to ignore them. In other words, she gave me hope. She mentioned some bankers from Panama that she knew from university. They were skilled at moving money around in a way that kept things private, just like in Switzerland. She said she could bring them to us so we could discuss her plan. When they came, we all shared dinner together. Even though we didn't talk about the money being wrong or stolen, everyone understood it was. Maybe they thought the money came from some illegal sources, but they didn't mind. We started by sending money to the Cayman Islands. Then it went to Costa Rica, later to Jersey, an island near England, and finally back to Panama, where it would be clean and available again. Who would have thought that Jersey was such a big banking place? After dinner that night, we had some drinks and returned to the hotel, where Claudia took care of us. After all that, she was eager to go out and meet some guys. It was a wild idea, and I convinced her not to go. The next day, when the bankers returned to Panama, they took $110,000 of my money to help me get a Panamanian passport. It was a real passport with my picture, but a different name. I haven't used it in a couple of years, but I still keep it somewhere. I still had a list of things I wanted to do in my life, and now I thought I would be able to do them with plenty of money. But Claudia was always wanting more. I had real powers of attorney for 3 of the farms, but she got greedy and wanted to sell your share. She said she could create a fake power of attorney for your part, and we would disappear before anyone, including you, could notice. By the way, how did you find out? I shrugged and said that people talk, and eventually it reached Pete, who called me to ask why I was selling the farm without telling him. By then, our banker had seen the fake document and shared his concerns with me. Even Bubba found out, talking about tractors. It felt like everyone knew something was wrong. By the way, did Matt find you? He was really mad that you were willing to take $20,000 from him. He thought you were just tricking me. He didn't even know about you and his mom, but he was determined to find you and get his money back. Bruce chuckled softly. He almost caught me. I was hiding in an empty rented house that very few knew about in one of the farms. But Matt knew because back in school, we used to go there to hang out if we had some money to spare. I stepped out onto one of the roads through the grove and spotted his truck on the other side. I realized this wasn't a good situation, but fortunately, he didn't see my truck. I think we were hiding behind the trees or something, but I was about to sell the truck, so I didn't think much of it. Bruce fell quiet again, as if he needed to gather his thoughts. The situation with Consuela at the end was very different. I did many adventurous things with Claudia, but with Consuela, I just wanted to be in charge. The group meetings with the other Grove owners were just a way to keep them happy, and it worked. They stayed away long enough for Claudia and me to finish the Grove sales. It was foolish of them to give me control over their property. My father worked for them for years, and they expected me to do the same, like a hard-working servant, giving my all for a little reward. They paid me. I think they were surprised. Bruce looked at me as if to ask, "Have you been with any of these women? Consuela is really good. Not like Claudia, but Claire, and you can trust Consuela now." I replied, "I don't mix business with personal matters." "That's too bad," Bruce said. "I wanted you to try." He mentioned Consuela again, saying I could even bring Claire and switch partners. "Claire looks pretty attractive." "I didn't respond when you left. I believe the last place you were seen was in the Dominican Republic. But you didn't stay there. What happened since then?" "Yes," Bruce said. "We arrived in the Dominican Republic on my old passport, but a few hours later we flew to Costa Rica with a new Panamanian passport. Claudia was with me. We landed in San Jose, Costa Rica, and spent a couple of days there. We stayed at a hotel near a casino where many women were around. Claudia and I enjoyed ourselves at the bar, and she was picking one of the ladies based on who seemed interested. Many didn't want to chat, so we let them go. but there were still plenty of choices, and we had some fun nights there. After that, we went to the West Coast and did some deep-sea fishing. It's amazing there. You should try it. Marlin, swordfish, sailfish, so much you can catch. Claudia found something new there, too. One day, she introduced me to an American guy, but he also spent some time with women. I could even tell you about some of the things that happened with him. He was fit and smooth, just as adventurous as Claudia. I was tired of Bruce bragging, so I waved for him to carry on. We stayed there for a week. By then, we thought our money had run out and was in the bank. Our next stop was Panama. This is where everything went wrong. We boarded a flight to Panama City, and the flight was fine. When we arrived, Claudia went to get the rental car while I grabbed my luggage. That was the last time I saw Claudia. She left me. I searched the airport for an hour before I realized she was gone. I ended up being the one to take the blame. I hired some people in Panama to find her, but she had completely vanished. I wasn't even sure she was really from Panama. I got a hotel room, and the next day I discovered where the bank with my account was, so I went there. "I'm sorry, sir, but your wife took all the money from your account yesterday." "No, sir, we don't know where it went. She took everything in bearer bonds." Bruce lowered his head and sat down, shaking it. "Can you believe it? She stole my money right in front of me. I wasn't broke, though, because I still had some funds left and money from selling my tractors and truck. But it was a little over $100,000. That was far less than the $15 million. I felt sick thinking about how I had been tricked. But maybe someone up there was helping me. The next morning, I got a call from the bank saying that the last million had just come in from abroad. Of course, I wanted to get it. I rushed back to the bank and moved the money to a new account, one that didn't have her name on it. That's the whole story. It's clear that Claudia lied to me about the treatment in Panama. I talked to the best doctors there, and they only offered the same kinds of treatments we have in the States. She had lied to me and taken most of my money, but now, with over $1 million, I could live a comfortable life in Panama for many years. Still, I didn't like it. I moved at least every 6 months, more often if I thought someone was getting too close. With the rest of the money, I got some Canadian documents that should hold up unless someone did a deep check, something only big agencies could do. No one cared enough about me to dig that deep. Maybe I was being paranoid, but there were times when people asked questions about me that made me uneasy. Leaving the country with a new name felt like the smart thing to do. So here I am. I think it's time to change hotels again. If you can find me, then others can too. You said you wouldn't turn me in, right? I nodded. There was no reason to do that now. I just feel foolish for calling you a friend for most of my life. You remember Connie Lopez, right? The girl I dated who was special to me? Of course. She was something else. I was with her long before you were. Well, she told me a long time ago that you weren't really my friend and that one day you would turn on me. She was right. I stood up and walked to the door. "Hey, you were the closest friend I had," Bruce said, "but I couldn't help it. I told you, I have my issues." He was still chuckling as I closed the door behind me and headed down the hallway to the front desk. Passing through the area, I noticed 2 big men sitting there. I caught their eye and nodded. They understood what I meant. I put Bruce's room key on a small table and left the room. That night, I took a flight back to Nashville after spending about a week away. While I was on the plane, I read a news story about a man's body found in a quiet forest near Quebec City, Canada. The first report said the man had been badly beaten with baseball bats while he was still alive, and there were signs in the ground around him. Later, 2 men, one on each side, shot him 6 times each, using .38 caliber revolvers, which made for a total of 12 bullets. The police thought these guns were used based on the bullet count and the lack of bullet casings. They had no idea who did this. The Canadian authorities couldn't identify the man right away because the documents he had were fake. In those fake documents, he was named Jack Marner, but they found no record of him anywhere in Canada. When they checked his last known place, a hotel room not far away, they found several other fake documents. A few weeks later, a small article on an online news site said the police had figured out that the victim was Bruce McWilliams. He had been wanted in Florida for several charges and had escaped the state years earlier. Even though I had told Bruce that I wouldn't go to the police, I was not being completely honest. There was a grove owner from New Jersey who wanted to know where Bruce was after he sold his grove. I promised that if I heard anything about Bruce, I would tell him. I thought it was fair that Bruce faced a fate that was worse, at the hands of someone more dangerous than he was. Maybe there was something wrong with me because I didn't feel sad or cry for Bruce at all.